Baked Bros presents the Know Your Dose podcast. Join hosts Nadeem Alhassan and Derek Espinosa as they turn the soil on the cannabis industry. With over 10 years of combined industry experience, these two experts will deliver your dose of cannabis, psychedelics, and personal development. Follow on their journey as they aim to destigmatize cannabis, combat the abuse of pharmaceuticals, and implement their altruistic approach into the budding cannabis industry.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Know Your Dose podcast. In this episode, we talk about crucial conversations. What is a crucial conversation? Well, we really break it down, and I'm telling you, you don't want to skip out on this episode. I personally believe this may be one of the best conversations that Derek and I have had yet to date. We also cover in the very beginning what's going on with the Smart and Safe initiative, which is the legalization of recreational cannabis here in the state of Arizona. And then we get into the 7 steps of a crucial conversation. Enjoy the show. Yeah, I know our listeners, we don't really have video content yet, but we will. Not too long. We don't know when, but not too long. And then it'll be cool. You can see Derek's new glasses that he's got. Are those
they
the
are.
blue light
So
blockers?
what's interesting is when I started wearing these, I saw a noticeable difference in my sleeping. And I don't know if that's just like placebo effect or it's actually doing something. And I'm not noticing as many headaches. So
are you wearing them all day? Are you wearing them inside? Are you wearing them, what's your routine?
So typically like around 3:00 ish. Well, from mid-afternoon on is when I spend the most time like looking right at my computer. So if I know I'm going to be sitting in front of the computer for a few hours, I'm going to throw them on. Other than that, if I'm not, then I don't really have them on until like between 6 and 7, typically around 7, when the sun's starting to go down. Because in theory, it's helping, filter out that blue light, which allows that melatonin secretion to start. I have a hard time sleeping. So
right. There was a study that showed just as little as 1 hour of blue light from watching a TV screen or computer monitor can reduce your melatonin production by 50%.
Yeah, that's significant.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So if you're having a hard time sleeping, it may be because you were going to bed watching Netflix. And if you are, we would encourage you in getting some of these blue light blockers. We're not sponsored by any companies. I just happen to have a couple that I like. Personally, I like the Felix Gray ones. I know Thomas, our CEO, he actually goes above and beyond. He uses, I believe he has a pair of glasses that like the lens are actually red. So personally, there's no question about it. Those are better. But I personally don't like using those because everything's red. It's just weird.
It depends on where you place the most value, right? Is it the show that you're watching or is it the sleep you're getting? Thomas being Thomas, he's optimizing the right thing.
Yeah, he's definitely a biohacker. One last thing on that is, I see a lot of people wearing them for kind of like a fashion fad, and that's definitely a misuse of it, because if you're wearing them during the day, you're actually disrupting your circadian rhythm, and because there are certain rays of light that you do want during the day. And so if you know anybody that's wearing these during the day and they're not prescription and they're blue light blockers, be like, hey, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. Anyways, let's get into it, and we want to drop our news bomb for everybody. And what better piece of news to drop other than Prop 207? What is Prop 207, you ask? Well, that is the initiative for the Smart and Safe legalization campaign here in Arizona, and that is expected to be on the ballot for this November for recreational use. As of the most recent update that I've gotten is that the AZ Superior Court denied a lawsuit against the Smart and Safe legalization campaign, and again that the initiative will officially remain on the November ballot. There is a group out there, a dark savage group that is trying to fight this ballot, and you know what? As you said, they're probably just going to die on the sword. They can keep trying, but it's not going to happen this time. It's going through this time, guys. So buckle up. Here, I'm going to read this real quick, okay? This is breaking news. So there was a challenge to Prop 207 appealed to Arizona Supreme Court. Phoenix, Arizona, August 11th. Arizonans for Health and Public Safety, AZHPS, announced Tuesday that they are appealing their legal challenge to the Smart and Safe Arizona Initiative's 100-word statement to the Arizona Supreme Court. We are appealing this decision because we continue to believe that the 100-word statement fails to accomplish its purpose as required by the Arizona law, said AZHPS Chairwoman Lisa James. The summary fails to disclose key provisions, including that it would redefine marijuana in Arizona law, cap the excise tax at 16%, and alter the burden of proof for marijuana DUI. Further, it misleads voters on limits to marijuana cultivation and incorrectly states that it protects employers' rights when it in fact decreases them. The decision by the court provides ample basis for our appeal. John Shadig, apologies, John, if I'm saying that wrong, lead counsel for the plaintiffs, stated Tuesday, Arizona law makes it clear that if the summary is ambiguous and susceptible to more than one interpretation, it is invalid, and the measure may not appear on the ballot. For that reason, we are appealing the decision to the Arizona Supreme Court. This isn't just a straightforward legalization of marijuana for recreational use. This initiative is a 17-page of sweeping new law, says James. Voters have a right to know. The deadline for Arizona general election ballots to be printed is August 21st, and a decision is expected before then. What do you take away from that?
Essentially, this other group that's opposing this measure is, in my estimation, using something very, very crafty. So if the law really is that 100-word statement can't be ambiguous and can't be have more than one interpretation, in my mind, just from the conversations I've had with people who I know are lawyers, that's pretty cut and dry, right? Like the Supreme Court's going to look at that and see if there really is any way, whether it's valid or not, to look at this thing from two different perspectives, and that could be difficult, right? Because let's be honest. First of all, 100 words is not that much, and I could say a bunch of different things. Actually, everything on this podcast I'm saying is open to interpretation. So that language does have to be super clear. So I trust that we have people making those decisions and writing those types of statements who know how to do what they need to do to make sure that thing is watertight, so that, it passes through the Supreme Court as well.
You know what it sounds like to me, Derek? It sounds like there's some crucial conversations going on, and the people involved may not be aware what a crucial conversation is.
I think we should, man. I think this is a perfect time for this too, because, not only are the people at the, state capitol having crucial conversations, but there's going to be Arizonans, in general, who have to have crucial conversations, whether it's with their employer, whether it's with their family or friends who may not, let's be honest, like last time half the votes, just over half the votes, voted not in favor of legalizing cannabis. So yeah, there's going to be some tough conversations for people, and we should embrace them.
Definitely. And so what the purpose of this episode is to fall in line with our personal development episodes. And this is a tool for talking when stakes are high. And I actually came across this book from Thomas, our CEO. He recommended it, and I'll be honest, I have not read it. And primarily, the primary reason I have not read it is because I don't want to take in too much than that I can retain right now, and so I have a couple other topics that I've really dove into, and also from a handful of friends, they've said that I'm quite skilled at some of the steps that are outlined in this book. Again, I don't know what they all are, but in the last week, I have digested a lot of the summaries online, and I do have the book here, and I have kind of flipped through it, and I do get the gist of it. And so I'd be happy to, kind of talk about it. And in a nutshell, again, crucial conversations are literally tools for talking when the stakes are high. And every day, I would say we have conversation.
I was going to add that I have read this book, and it was a game changer for me personally, because while I'm able to navigate lots of conversations really well, as soon as things started to get difficult, which we'll describe what that looks like, I really didn't know what to do. I don't really have a lack of composure, so as we'll discover, like I'm not I don't go to violence, but I go to silence pretty quickly. And for
Same.
me, this book was a game changer, not in my business life, but more in particular in my personal relationships, like that with my wife, and just having tools to keep us on the same page. Because when you're dealing with personal relationships, man, the waters can get deep and very, very tricky. And so having something like this book and the things that are outlined here can be super helpful for navigating those crucial conversations.
Definitely. In the book, it focuses on techniques on how to hold these such conversations and in a positive space when surrounded by highly charged emotions. I love that they use this terminology, highly charged emotions, and their findings are based on 25 years of research with 20,000 people. I found that when I was kind of just going through some of the summaries and stuff, and I found that to be quite interesting. And so their model has essentially 7 steps, and starting from 1 through 7. Number 1, and I would like to break some of these down as we continue the conversation, is start with the heart, right? Empathy and positive intent. Number 2 is stay in dialogue. Number 3 is make it safe. 4, don't get hooked by emotion or hook them. 5, agree a mutual purpose. 6, separate facts from story. And 7, agree on a clear action plan. What does it mean when they say start with the heart, empathy and positive intent? How do you approach a conversation with empathy and a positive intent?
Well, so this is the one that's like, if you don't get this right, the rest of the steps aren't as helpful. And it's because when you say start with heart, it really is like I'm coming to this conversation trying to have a positive outcome, not only for myself, but for whoever I'm having this conversation with, right? We tell ourselves these stories. And so like if we're using the analogy of someone not being pro cannabis, I can have a story in my head about what type of person you are and your beliefs. And I can come into this trying to basically finger wag at you and tell you why you're wrong, which isn't going to get you anywhere, right? So instead, it's coming from a place of like, I really want to understand your perspective. I value your perspective. I think that your perspective is probably coming from somewhere important that you feel is true, and I respect and value that as well. So for me, that's what starting with heart and positive intent is just being open and receptive to what this other person has to say.
Yeah, so it sounds like just we need to enter the conversation being open. Our own past experiences are can bear on any situation really that we find ourselves in, and unique past creates meaning of that event, right? And so it's for me when I think about that, for an example, it's not really fair to go into a conversation with somebody new or somebody that I am close with and immediately already have a story made up in my mind based off of past experiences. And so we need to be open, right? Open-minded and open heart. I like that a lot. I think that's a very great way to enter the conversation and defuse any walls or any ticking time bombs that may be buried waiting to explode.
One thing that I thought of as you were making some of those comments was, this is a perfect instance where the topic that we covered a while back, free will, comes into play. Because if I, at least conceptually, have this understanding that your different perspective is coming from a place where you didn't have free will getting to there, and vice versa, it's much easier for me to say, hey, I probably don't have all the facts. I'm probably super biased to what I'm seeing, and so are they. And so maybe through this dialogue we can come to a mutual understanding.
Right. And so, man, gosh, this is such powerful information. The book itself, and again, guys, you can go on YouTube and you can find all kinds of information out there that'll help you understand this and think about the people and higher power, if you will, that are, at the different court levels, and that are, creating these ballots. And if they were able to use these tools and tactics, for within the cannabis industry, I mean, we're going to talk about it. I mean, these tools and these steps, we're going to outline them again. And then the purpose of that being is because there's going to be many opportunities in your life where you're going to have conversations, whether it be with a parent or a grandparent or of any family member or friend, about cannabis, right? I mean, this is that is a crucial conversation. I know it was for me whenever I had to, talk to my dad about it, and I did not know these tools. I did not know these seven steps and the skills that are outlined in this book. And I tell you, it would have been a lot nicer if I did. But number 2 is stay in dialogue. So the key to a critical conversation is to always stay in dialogue. If the lines of the communication go down, then there's no hope for a resolution, right? And so only when we're talking can we get all of the relevant information out in the open, and this requires a two-way flow of information. I know I actually can fail at that sometimes, because if the container is not safe, which we're going to talk about, if the container is not safe, sometimes I find myself withdrawing from the conversation, which then there goes against step number 2, which is stay in dialogue, because I'm no longer reciprocating.
Yeah, the authors talk about dialogue as this space of it's a shared pool of meaning. And you and I, as we're having this conversation, are adding to this pool of meaning. And the meaning that we're building is based on whatever purpose that, we set out at the beginning of this conversation. So it could be differing views on cannabis, and we're trying to come to some kind of understanding amongst each other. But like you said, like, we have to make sure that space stays safe, because people will go down 2 paths, right? One is silence. And that's when we start to mask what we're saying. We avoid talking or avoid certain topics, or we completely withdraw from the conversation. And now that person's not contributing to the pool of meaning anymore. The second thing that happens is people can demonstrate violence within this framework of dialogue, and that's where they're trying to control the conversation. Now they're labeling things that you're doing or actions, right, trying to highlight certain things that may not be relevant. And then the last one is attacking, so trying to put you on the defensive, being very aggressive. And this is something that I have seen and experienced when discussing cannabis with people, right? Typically the person who's against it becomes can go to silence or violence, and vice versa, right? If I'm not super confident in my opinion, I might go to violence or silence. If I'm very, very adamant that I am correct, then I might be more prone to go to violence.
Yeah, I believe I heard you say in the beginning that you find yourself more so withdrawing. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that seems to be where I fall on that continuum. But again, just upon further reflection, it really is a matter of context. If it's something I truly believe in, right, that I feel I'm right on, like cannabis,
right,
I am more likely to get emotionally charged and caught up in, like, I'm right about this, as opposed to if somebody talks to me about politics, which is an area that I am just not super comfortable or knowledgeable in, I'm probably going to go to silence. It's like, I just don't have a whole lot to say here. I don't really feel safe in this conversation, so I'm just going to shut down and not really say anything.
So listeners, keep an eye out for that next time you're having a conversation with your husband or wife or spouse or a friend, family, whoever it is. If you're having a conversation about something and they withdraw from the conversation, we have to pick up these signs, right? That we have to watch for these signs of stress, right? If the opposing or if the counterpart is taking a deep breath, right? Or is it because they are frustrated? Is it because they're angry? Are they showing clear signs of angry? Are they being responsive versus reactive? Right. So, I find that to be myself in times as well. Again, withdrawing. And so number 3 is make it safe. right? Create this safe container. And Thomas really helped me understand this one, and it really helped.
Go ahead.
So when we make it safe, we need to make a person feel safe. The safer they feel, the more likely they are to open up. So the greater the greater their fear, the more likely they will either close down or fight back, right? And so we all have these people in our family or in our lives that are probably sticking out right now. Again, I'm one that closes down, but Derek, I think you brought a good perspective. It actually may depend on the context, and I need to pay attention to that too for myself, because there are things that I firmly believe in, and I don't close down. I actually push back harder, right? And so closing down can take one of three forms: masking, where we pretend to agree, like we pretend to agree and be listening, but we're actually not, or of avoiding, so like distraction techniques, and then of course withdrawing. And I have found myself in all three of those containers. But we get so drawn into the conversation that we may actually miss the bigger picture. So we focus on words and we fail to read the cues around us, right? So three key areas, excuse me, to look for when the moment or when the moment a conversation turns crucial are signs that the other person does not feel safe, and also being aware of our own style under duress. So examples for all of these include our own feelings plus for them, the book had shared, tightening of eyes, change in energy and language and tone. So we need to be triple processing: content, context, and self. Right? Content, context, and self. This often involves observation, as if we were
one of the
watching
tools that
another
they
person.
provide is a nice way to think about this, and it's to, in your mind, ask yourself, what do I really want? And you say, what do I really want for myself? What do I really want for others?
Mm-hmm.
What do I really want for this relationship?
Right.
And how would I behave if I really wanted these results? So to bring it back to the conversation of cannabis, right? What do I want for myself? Well, I want for me to articulate exactly why I think that cannabis should be legalized in 2020. What do I want for the others? I just want them to understand my perspective, and maybe see that the stigma that they have in their mind is not, what's reality. For the relationship, I want to walk away regardless of what happens in this conversation and still be friends with this person, still be family with this person. And how would I behave if I really wanted these things? Well, I'd probably be kind. I'd probably be respectful, and I'd probably make sure that we were both safe in this conversation.
I believe respect is the key there, and it's really it's really easy for us to lose sight of respect and define what respect really is. I often encounter certain people that demand respect but don't really give the respect. And so it's like, how can you expect to have respect if you're not giving the respect? And the book also outlines 4 paths of powerful listening, and they called it AMP, AMPP, and I'm going to list it out here. So A stands for ask, and this is to get the conversation rolling. So like, you could start this like, I'd really like to hear your opinion on. Right. It's a good way to engage in the conversation. And what's also kind of funny is, we haven't really talked about, some of the negotiation books that we've read, but I saw some similarities between this book and the negotiation book, and one of those is mirror. So M in the acronym AMP. So mirror, to confirm feeling. So it's critical in the stage in our tone of voice. So we play back what we sense. For example, I sense you're angry. You look unsure. But in the negotiation, information or books that we've read, like mirroring is just kind of repeating the last word, and as you advance in that, the last, you can work your way up to the last sentence that the person said. Right, it shows that you're listening. It's an advanced technique of listening, and it also gets the other person to continue engaging in the conversation.
No. I was
Did you have
wondering if
something?
you were going to go on to the two P's.
Yep. So paraphrase, and that's to acknowledge the other person's story. So the key here is to stay out of emotion and then use and to use their language as much as possible. Again, the key is to stay out of emotions. When we get into our emotions, that's when we are not thinking rationally. So we might start off with a phrase like, let's see if I have let's see if I've got this right. Right? I'm paraphrasing. So like if you're explaining something to me and instead of me just word vomiting back, I'm going to paraphrase the question. Let's see if I've got this right. And so that's just you would do that in the area that you want to cover the most meaning. So and does that make sense?
So this is a
It's
tactic
yep.
that's not only so, like, as you talked about this negotiation book, in that particular book, Never Split the Difference, it's called Summaries, right? There was a psychologist
Mm-hmm.
named Carl Rogers who was really one of the founders of what's called humanistic psychology, and it's this idea that, like, you're developing a relationship with your client, and together with this shared pool of meaning, which a lot of this Crucial Conversations is things that this guy was working on back in the 60s and 70s. But one of the techniques that he used that was really powerful that a lot of psychologists have since, adopted is this idea of summarizing what the person just said so that you can, but like, is that correct? So you provide this paraphrase, this summary, and then you ask the person, did I do that justice? Right. And that makes them feel like, yes, you're understanding me. That's right. And now we can move on to the next piece, right?
Man, I'm seeing so many similarities through a lot of the different personal development tools and classes that we've taken and digested. And so there's another one that I went to a couple months ago. It was for delivering presentations with high impact, and they coach you. If you're on, let's say I'm doing a TED Talk. Fingers crossed. Hope I do a TED Talk someday, guys. Anyways, let's say I'm doing a TED Talk and somebody asks me a question. Well, you would paraphrase that question to let them know and to make sure that you understand the question, right? So I think to your point and what you're saying, it's a very useful tool, and it's something that I know that I need to get better at. I know if I were to get better at paraphrasing people's questions, it would definitely help diffuse certain situations and conversations. So the last P is this is for when we're getting nowhere. So we just covered ask, mirror, paraphrase, and the last P is prime. And again, this is for when the conversation is just absolutely going nowhere. So for those who go into flight, like flight mode, we might need to encourage them to speak by suggesting something that we think they are thinking or feeling. So an example would be, I guess you think I'm being unfair, or I sense you are angry, right? To me, and I could be wrong, but to me, this is almost like the negotiation tactics of labeling. Like you're labeling the situation. It seems like, it feels like, it looks like you're upset. Versus saying, "Why are you so upset?"
Right. This reminds me of so the idea here, based on psychological research, is that as soon as I name an emotion, it automatically decreases the intensity of that emotion, right? Because I might not even realize that I'm getting super angry until you say, "Hey, Derek, you seem really angry." And actually, I've had this happen in meetings where we're having crucial conversations. Someone says, "Hey, Derek, you're starting to get a little tense," and it's like, "Whoa, I totally am." Okay, well, that's not as bad, right? What's funny is it's like the same idea in Harry Potter. Like, they talk about Voldemort, and people don't want to say Voldemort's name. It's like the elephant in the room. Don't say that name. But as soon as you say the name, you decrease the power associated with it. And it's the same idea, same principle with emotions.
I think it's funny because you did this yesterday morning, and you did a great job of it, which leads to number 4. So, and then I'll close the loop on that, which number 4 is don't get hooked by emotions, right? Or hook them. And the first step of controlling our emotions is to name it. So like you did yesterday, you came in a little hot at me, and you checked yourself, and you're like, hey, I came in there a little hot. I'm sorry about that. Right. And it was a big hug. Right. So naming, naming the emotion as you're feeling it. And guys, that requires a really large, a large, emphasis, or I don't know, a large, a strong practice in self-awareness is what I'm trying to say, because it's really easy to get lost in the conversation and lost in the moment. So what type of emotion is it? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it hurt? Are you ashamed? So I mean, and a lot of us are just as the book says, are emotionally illiterate. And I really like that. I know that I am at times for sure, and we need to hone on our ability to distinguish the different emotions. I know that we will all be a lot better off if we can.
Man, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and the reason is because so when we talk about well, first of all, emotions feel so real, right? Like when you're angry and truly angry, that is literally the only thing you can think about is how angry I am. And so it has this feeling that this is reality. Like there's nothing outside of this that's true. And so in those emotions, we make some really poor decisions because we feel completely justified to do X, Y, and Z when we're sad, angry, or scared. And so the reason why it's so important to peel back and develop this self-awareness is because essentially what's happening in your brain is the fear anxiety center is ramping up, and the part that makes reasonable, logical, informed decisions is turning down, which is a recipe for disaster, right? And that's why it's so important to do things like meditation or affirmations. Like one that I think is really powerful is if I say I am angry, I am identifying as angry. Now, if I just subtly shift that to I feel angry, I'm one step removed, right? I can go one step further and in my mind say, I am aware of feeling angry. And now that anger is even further back, which allows me enough space to say, I am aware of being angry. I probably should take some deep breaths. I probably should go give Nadeem a hug and let him know that I'm just way too charged right now and I did not mean to come across that way.
Yeah, man. Pull up your britches. Quit being so rough. Jeez. You couldn't be more dead on, man. And then golly, it's so easy to talk about, but in the heat of the moment, we all fail. And so there's 3 steps that can help with not letting the emotions get charged, right? So when emotions start flying around, it's easy to get hooked, which is what the book talks about, getting hooked. So the steps to getting hooked, or to stop getting hooked, there are 3 steps, and that's, I'm going to read them. So keep focused on the end goal, right? So keeping focus on the end goal. I know it's really easy to start on one topic of the conversation, and then all of a sudden you're talking about something that person did a month ago or a year ago or 3 years ago, and it's like, well, you always do this, or you're never going to change, or well, okay, now we're derailed and we're not focused on the purpose of this conversation. So number 1 was keep focus on the end goal. Number 2 is refuse to play the game. So just simply being aware that a game is in play means you're less likely to get caught by it, right? And what I take from that is don't stoop to their level, right? If somebody's getting angry, if somebody is taking jabs at you, there's no need to engage in that, right? And so that's where I actually struggle with this, is if somebody's taking jabs at you, okay, and maybe they're overly aggressive, or maybe they're saying some things. Is it improper to withdraw in that moment? I think that, I don't think it is.
If someone is coming at you with violence, right? What it's saying is don't go to silence, right? Don't mask and just agree because now you're getting angry and I just don't want to deal with this. Don't avoid it by switching subjects, and don't completely withdraw. If you're coming at me and you're aggressive, or you're trying to control or attack, right? Then I need to maintain, that starting with heart and just say, hey, you know what? I want to let you know right now that I don't really appreciate the way you're talking to me. I feel like you're, taking some jabs at me that I feel are completely inappropriate. And if that's the type of conversation that you want to have, I don't want any part of it. Right? It's being firm in your ability to say, hey, I'm not cool with what's happening. I'm not gonna stoop to your level. I'm not gonna play this game of a race to the bottom. Now we're calling each other names and stuff. I'd rather just cut the conversation here, and we can pick this back up when both of us are in a place where we feel we can have a productive conversation. And that's super hard, right? Because as soon as someone throws a blow, it's
That's
like I'm
so
throwing
hard,
blows
man.
back. Heat rounds are coming.
Totally. Okay, so one more time. That was keep focus on the end goal, refuse to play the game. And number 3 is avoid the sucker's choice. So we can often find ourselves in a situation where we think that there are only 2 solutions, to shut up and let it go, which that's where I fall into. I'm just like, you know what? I'll just let it go. All right, it's over. It's fine. It's whatever. And I'm going to loop that back to cannabis. Or number 2 is to to shut up or let it go, or to express brutal honesty. Right, like, oh my God, I have people in my life that are brutally honest, and that can actually be damaging. Right, just as shutting up and letting it go can be damaging. And so I find myself, I think we talked about this maybe on like the first episode, of the Know Your Dose podcast. First or second, we were talking about Sober October. And that was something that I realized whenever I took the break from cannabis, is that I would, when I would smoke cannabis, and now I've got a much better, I've got a lot more awareness of this. Hey, happy 420. I've got a lot more awareness of this. And so I don't do it anymore. I truly don't. And I would use cannabis to let it go. Right. And that's not okay, because that's a form of suppression, and I'm only suppressing it, and I'm actually not dealing with it. So let's take cannabis out of the equation. Anybody who does that, where that you just shut up and let it go, that's not healthy for you. That festers inside into other things, right? And now, if you're now tying that to a substance like cannabis or alcohol or anything for that matter, that's just a compound
Right. I mean,
effect for a
you could do
disaster.
that with meditation, right? Shut down and like, I'm going to go meditate in my own space, and I'm going to clear my mind, and I'm not going to deal with this BS, right? Conversations aren't productive that way either.
Yeah. I mean, you could do it. Good point, man. You could do it with exercise. You could do it with meditation. Now, I would argue that some are probably a better option than others. I know that when I go exercise and I'm frustrated, I always feel better. There's no question about it. And, probably has to do with endorphins. And
I guess the case is
stuff.
that as long as you're not shutting down, right? Because the idea of shutting down, at least for me, is just like, I'm out, right? Not clearly stating and standing alone in the moment and saying, hey, what's happening right here is not okay. I'm all for having this conversation. But when, emotions aren't, when you're not attacking me, essentially, right? Because let's be honest, like sitting there and letting someone attack you, not ideal.
Yeah, not ideal at all. And to continue on that, actually, I think one good tactic, and I found myself doing this last week, is I had a pretty charged conversation, and I definitely withdrew, and I shut up and was trying to let it go, and I ended up going to work out, and I felt so much better after I worked out, and then I continued the conversation and had a better solution, right? And so what that told me, I didn't know it before then, but I realize it now, is that hey, it's okay to get to a stopping point in the conversation and be like, hey, you know what? Let's pick this up later. Are you in a safe space where we can stop this conversation right now? Because I need a break, whether it be a walk, whether it be you go exercise or meditate, and then come pick up the conversation.
That's
right?
Massive, because so often in these relationships that we're in, we get in a rhythm where it's like, oh, this is starting, and we're just not going to stop. We're just going to continue to argue about this and feel like we have to solve it, when it's in reality, that's probably not going to happen. And like you said, like, people need to understand that it's okay to put a bookmark in a conversation and come back to it when both people are ready to start over.
Absolutely. So number 5 was agree a mutual purpose, right? So what's the purpose of the conversation? So what is key to find a mutual objective that both sides agree to, right? We have to find the common ground, right? And that has, I've seen this, and you know what I've found this to be helpful in crucial conversations and just presentations and daily meetings with the team and within business. And it's like, what is the purpose of this conversation? And the more I can continue to talk about it how we are and drill it into my head, we often find that we come to a solution much quicker. And oftentimes too, when working, anybody who's got a direct report, like your boss or something, when you start the conversation with the purpose, you actually might speed up the entire meeting, because the opposing person may already, they know what the purpose of the conversation is, and they can get to an answer much quicker. So if you find yourself in these hour-long meetings at work, if you just start with the purpose of the conversation, you might cut it down by 50%. That's
well, I've
a lot
seen
of time
this,
saved.
like you alluded to, in our own business. And again, if you know the way broadly, you will see it in all things. And what I mean by that is it's not surprising that starting with purpose in a meeting or a crucial conversation or a presentation is something that is useful, right? Because how do I know if I'm on track or off track unless I know where I'm headed, right? And so when that
Right.
first those three examples you gave right before this step, the first one was stay focused on the end goal. Well, the end goal is the purpose of this conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're having a conversation around cannabis legalization, the end goal is for both of us to have greater clarity on where the other person is coming from. And if that is the focus, then I'm going to continually make sure that I'm steering the conversation in that direction and not getting out into the weeds on things that are just not relevant.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say here, paraphrasing, is again agreeing on a mutual purpose. So because if I want one thing and you don't, then it's unlikely really to be a successful conversation in the end. So we need to spend more time to find an area where we both agree on, right? And I know I may have confused this part by interweaving business, but in terms of a crucial conversation, right? If you and your spouse or whoever you're speaking to, it's a heated moment or an emotionally charged situation, a quicker solution would be to again find the common ground so that you can both agree on, and don't expect to resolve it all in one go. Like, I mean, there's going to be multiple takes, man.
Here's the thing. If we decide to have a conversation about horses, and I'm in my mind arguing about zebras and you're talking about donkeys, it's like neither one of us is going anywhere, right? Because we're going to continue to argue about what this horse looks like, but we're not talking about the same thing. And if we had just spent 5 minutes in the beginning of the conversation going, well, what's your idea of what a horse is? Well, what's your idea? Well, oh, so you're actually talking about a zebra. Okay, let's talk about that. And so often in these conversations, dude, we are not talking about the same thing.
Totally. And they have another good acronym that really stuck out to me. And I think what I'm going to do with these acronyms is I'm going to make flashcards for them. So if anybody wants to do that too, we'll put some links in the show notes on just some of the YouTube videos and stuff. But it was CRIB, CRIB, and so C stands for commit to seek a mutual purpose. So before you start the conversation, make sure all parties or you and the counterpart agree to first seek a mutual purpose. Don't just walk in and say, hey, the purpose of this is, because you're really just controlling the conversation at that point. Get the other person's participation and get them to commit to seek a mutual purpose. So I'll use my grandma, for example. Gosh, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. She's from the Bible Belt. She lives in Missouri, and hardcore Baptist, and she uses Xanax at night. And I was like, Grandma, and I didn't know I was committing to seek a mutual purpose. I'm just realizing it now. The story comes to mind. I was like, hey, I see that you're using Xanax, right? You're using this to calm down and help go to sleep. That I'm in the cannabis industry, and I've been working with this for quite some time. Would you be willing to have a conversation to hear me out on how I could possibly, or would you be willing to have a conversation on how cannabis can actually replace the Xanax? And so I got her to agree on for the purpose of the conversation, versus coming in hot and being like, grandma, dude, you got to stop taking Xanax. Like, cannabis is so much better. It's just like,
you can
it's
already
not,
see
it's
how
not conducive.
those two different ways of starting a conversation will yield different results, right? Because if I
Oh
come
my,
again, that
yeah,
was a heat round, right? Grandma, you got to get off the Xanax and you got to get on cannabis. Okay, like who the heck are you to
totally.
tell me X, Y, and Z instead of,
Yeah.
hey, I'd love to have a conversation about this. Is this something you'd be open to? Now it's my choice. Yeah, I would love to have that
Yeah.
conversation.
Is this
Yeah.
something you'd be open to? I like that a lot, man. That's really cool. And so that was C, crib, right? R is recognize the purpose behind the strategy. So let's just use the grandma example, right? The purpose of the strategy is because I want to help I want to help educate you on how this could be a good replacement, how cannabis could be a good replacement for the pharmaceuticals that you're using, right? So you've got to examine the motives, and so what do I want for me? What do I want, for them, which we just covered, and then what do I want for us? Right? It's just recognize the purpose behind the strategy. Okay, so that was C, commit to the mutual purpose. R, recognize the purpose behind the strategy, and then you have I, invent a mutual purpose. So if a mutual purpose is not easy to find, then one is required to move up to a higher level. And again, guys, it may sound like we're repeating ourselves, but this CRIB acronym falls in line. It's a tool to remember how to agree on a mutual purpose, right? So I is invent a mutual purpose. B is brainstorm new strategies. So afterwards, it's about finding mutual solutions, right? So let's say the conversation went well. Just to add a laugh real quick, I'm very persuasive, and my grandma definitely tried the cannabis, and then the following night she was on her knees praying to God for forgiveness. It was very funny, but poor bless her soul, love her. Anyways, she's much more open minded now. Again, this was like 7-8 years ago, but it was really funny. So that's probably because we didn't brainstorm new strategies, right? We just hopped right into it. It was like, okay, cool, she'll try it, and she tried a gummy, and then it was like, worked well, but she more so just guilted herself, right? So there was really we didn't think about it. We didn't set like a plan in place. There was no brainstorming.
For me, the invent a mutual purpose is fantastic, specifically because so often we start conversation, we get caught off guard by conversations, right? Like starting the way you did is fantastic in a perfect world, right? And there's opportunities for that, but it's more often the case that a conversation happens and then we're caught in a crucial conversation before I've had time to really think about articulating this mutual purpose, right? So at that point, I just have to invent one or imagine one for both of us so that I'm staying on track. And then what was B again?
Definitely. B was brainstorm new strategies.
Okay. For me, that's when you get locked in that conversation and it's not going. Like I have this strategy that I'm trying to put forward, right? And it's just not working. At that point, I have to have some situational adaptability and say, hey, this path I'm going down isn't working. I should probably reinvent another strategy.
Right, you have to put a plan in place for both people involved, not just for yourself, but for both people involved have to commit to a plan, whether it be the same mutual solution and plan or their individual plan with the purpose in mind. Right. So number 6 is separate facts from story. Oh my gosh, this is
it's tough, but it's awesome.
Yeah, this yeah. And it's critical, man, to separate the facts from opinion, as they're different. They're very different. So, first one says only what is irrefutable evidence, right? That's a fact. And then when seen or heard, when seen or heard and not the meaning created from it, how do I explain this? So that's an example, right? So when seen or heard and there's no irrefutable evidence, that's then a story, right? And so let's give an example that I'll pull an example out of here. Give me a second. I'm going to find this in this article and pull up an example. So let's see, a hotel receipt is fact, right? The husband having an affair is only opinion at this stage, right? So facts are a safe place to start, as it's a shared basis of agreement and less likely to be as stained in an emotional as
So I mean,
opinion. Does that make sense?
This is fantastic, and I can think of a personal example right off the bat, right? So let's say you come home one day and your spouse notices that you're a little bit more withdrawn than usual, right? Now that's a fact. You're withdrawn. I can tell objectively, this is irrefutable evidence that you normally talk this much and you're talking this much. Now, I could tell myself a story about how that's because you obviously don't care about me and you're just not involved in our life and blah, 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 right? That's the story that I'm telling myself. That's not necessarily a fact. That's your interpretation of what's happening. It could just be the case that today was just a super crappy day and I'm just really tired and I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night and X, Y, and Z. And I mean, that applies to business as well, right? Like there are stories that we tell ourselves about people, but until we have the actual facts to back up what's happening, that again is just a story that you're telling yourself.
And there's three stories that are outlined, right? And so and we need to listen out for what helps us deconstruct how a person is viewing the situation. So these stories they'll tend to disempower and shift responsibility out of their focus or of control. And so the three stories are victim stories. It's not my fault. Go back to extreme ownership. Don't play victim. There's no victim story. Okay. Don't play victim stories. There's the villain stories.
Right.
It's all your
Absolutes.
fault. Right. Absolutes. Okay. And then there's the helpless story, right? There's nothing else I can do. Well, like there's nothing else I can do. Where I find myself in that is I feel pretty strong in not playing victim stories or villain stories, but I find myself in the helpless story sometimes. I'm like, there's nothing else I can do. Like that's basically just giving up, right? Giving up and letting go. How we said, shut up and let go. Don't do that. That's where I find myself at times is, there's, what do you want me to do? And you know what that really is? It's just that I'm not emotionally intelligent enough to continue the conversation, or I'm not being aware of any of the 6 tactics prior to this one that we've talked about, because if I'm aware of these, well, that wouldn't be the case.
Right. I mean,
right.
The reality is that it's easy to read this stuff and to say these acronyms, and it's a whole nother thing to put them into practice to where you're not falling into some of these traps,
Totally.
right? And stories is one that's just,
right.
I mean, you were constructed with stories. As a child, your parents were playing out these stories, you adopted these stories. And so again, back to free will, right? These stories are not your own. But that doesn't absolve you from the fact that you need to recognize and own up to the fact that, oh man, I am really bad at telling victim stories. That's something I really need. Now I have a choice.
Definitely.
I didn't have a choice before, but because I'm aware, now I do. I'm in the same boat as you, where it's typically a helpless story where it's like, hey, I've read and done everything I possibly can. Is that actually true? Because that doesn't seem like a fact.
Yeah. If we continue to find that there's still a disagreement, then of course there's an acronym outlined in the book called ABC. Easy to remember. Easy as 1, 2, 3. So it's A is agree, right? So find the areas that you do agree on, right? Guys, I'm going to encourage you to listen to this and listen to this podcast again, because we're summarizing the book for you and we're giving you all the cheat sheets. And there might be little things here that you can just write out. And I promise you, because I've done it myself, that if you use these tools, they work. So agree. Right? Find the areas that you can agree on.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of, and I keep coming back to this, trying to talk to somebody about cannabis. I mean, for me, most of the conversations I had were people who were religious because of my background, right? And so one of the things that I found early on, and I believe I got it from an article that I read years back, was it's easier to have that conversation when we can start with a agreement, just like this is outlining. And so the tactic I would use was, well, I mean, would you agree that God created all the plants for, the purpose of men using them? And in my framework in religious background, yes, that is a fact. Okay, perfect. Well, then why would cannabis be any different? Why would it be this evil thing that humans weren't supposed to use? That doesn't make any sense. God didn't, or the devil didn't make plants. And it was like, oh, okay, I agree with that. Okay, well, now that we're on this footing,
right,
now we can move to the next thing. And it's,
which is build.
There we
Build.
go.
So let's build, right? And you'd probably appreciate this. So our education systems and culture raises us to be critical, right? Hypercritical. We are critical of ourselves. We're critical of everything, right? We're probably just like your interaction with, somebody at the church. They're critical upon you and your choices, and you have to break it down and get them to agree before you can build upon that. So we're better at tearing things down than building them up, and we need to reverse that. Okay, like we need to reverse that, and actually we need to probably just remove tearing things down all completely. So referring to like the negotiation, so like skilled negotiators will use a principle of yes and, right, no buts. It's yes and, right? Dale Carnegie talks about this too. Replace but with and. Okay. The example that Dale uses in his book is, hey Johnny, you did. I got your grade report, and I got your grade report, but you got good grades this semester, but it would be better if you picked up your algebra score, right? So what you just did was you complimented Johnny and said, hey, you did a good job this year or this semester, but you need to work on your algebra. Versus, hey Johnny, you did good on your grades this semester, and I would encourage you to pick up on your algebra, right? So now you just complimented him and you encouraged him. You didn't break him down, because that simple word but breaks him down. And so that's what we want to try and get away from. It's especially useful if the other side has missed out on a key part of the argument.
I absolutely love that. And the analogy that I always come back to with that, because I think it just paints it crystal clear, is like, how difficult is it to build? That takes a lot of work, right? Planning,
of course. Foundation,
it's hard,
baby.
It's tedious, takes a super long time. You know how easy it is to punch a hole in a wall, or to take a baseball bat to the side of a house, or just to throw a stick of dynamite in and just blow the whole thing up. Like, we could get this done in 30 seconds or less, guarantee it. And that's a perfect analogy for humans and for conversations.
Totally.
It is way easier to tear it down than it is to build it. And that's why we favor tearing it down.
Yeah.
Like we want what's easy, not what's,
absolutely.
super difficult, but may, yield better results in the long term. So if we could just shift that perspective
and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because again, applying these tools and tactics are really uncomfortable, and it's a ever evolving and ever growing process. And so C, we've got ABC: A, agree; B, build; C, compare. So we should not set up the other person's point of view to be wrong, but just different, right? Often in an opening statement like, I think I see things differently, can help, right? So let's compare and not again criticize the other person and tell them that they're wrong, right? You're wrong. No, hey, I get what you're saying, but I think I see this differently.
It's so much
much
easier to engage in a conversation when comparison is happening, especially about stories, because that's typically what we're comparing, right? Your story or your version of what happened versus my story, my version of what happened, as opposed to, like you said, you telling me what happened, and now I'm defensive, right? But if we're comparing and just saying, hey, this is how I feel, how do you feel? Oh, okay, well, you have a different perspective, and I feel totally fine now sharing my perspective. I don't feel like we're going to engage in this, mudslinging contest.
Imagine if the people in the court hierarchy and that are writing these laws and everything could compare their perspectives, right? Versus just condemn, criticize, and complain, as again Dale Carnegie's principle number 1 is like, right? So what if we could actually compare each other's perspectives? This even goes for politics too, I suppose. It's like, let's just compare each other's perspectives and see, what the outcome can be. Which leads to number 7, because we do need to wrap up. Is agree on a clear action plan. Right. So you just applied all 6 steps. You've got a couple different acronyms to use. Right. Well, don't just because the emotions are diffused and everybody's happy doesn't mean it's over. Right. What's the preventative from it happening again? right? And that's been a challenge for me too, because I ride off positive emotions, and so once the situation is diffused and we're all happy and hugs and all that stuff are flying through and all that, I'm like, okay, cool, it's over, right? But we've got to somehow put a check. We got to have some type of checks and balance that like prevents us from happening it again. So an example, this is simple. I've got my computer monitor and I've got my wall right up, behind it. I've got 7 sticky notes on it right now. And each sticky note is I've got 3 different colors going on here. I've got yellow, orange, and pink, and they're different. They stand for different things, and I've got my own little quote on there or reminder or whatever it is. That's just a simple way, but be sure that, so just because you reach a point of shared meaning, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a successful outcome. So again, you've got to put a plan in place. So no decision gets made, the wrong decision gets made, or no action happens following the decision. That's what you don't want to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think Winston Churchill said, I do not fear action. The only thing I fear is inaction. And it's because if we have this awesome, productive conversation and there's no follow-up, there's no follow-through, well, then essentially this conversation was just a waste of time. Nothing came from it. It wasn't productive because in a week, it's not even going to matter.
Absolutely. Well, hey, man, let's wrap up this conversation. I'm going to recap the 7 steps one more time. This has been an awesome conversation, and I hope our listeners got something out of this, again, because I definitely can see that I know that I've personally had, and I know that you have too, because we've talked about it. I've had many conversations, and I will continue, and our staff at Bake Bros will continue to have these conversations with individuals in dispensaries and online and at various events whenever events come back online because the whole COVID stuff. But anyways, 80% of the people that we've encountered in the past at our education days when we were doing them are those, to a degree, were crucial conversations. There are people who had a bad experience with edibles, and we had to diffuse that, right? We had to apply these tactics so that they would be willing to hear us out. So the 7 steps, again, are: number 1, start with your heart, empathy and positive intent. Number 2, stay in dialogue. Number 3, make it safe, create a safe container. Number 4, don't get hooked by emotion or hook them. Number 5, agree on mutual purpose. Number 6, separate facts from story. And number 7, agree on a clear action plan.
So I just want to crystallize one thing at the end of this conversation, and that is every conversation we as cannabis users have with people who are not cannabis users, and in particular people who are opposed to cannabis use, it is of the utmost importance that we follow these types of guidelines and maintain our composure and our side of the conversation. Because one thing that happens if I lose it on somebody as a cannabis consumer, they already have this stereotype in their head. And I just reaffirm that your version of me as a negative person is just, it's clear. Right. And so if we really want to make change, it really starts with these conversations with the very people in our communities. And we just need to do a better job of having extreme ownership in that realm. And I think this book, along with some of the others we listed, are just great ways to do that.
Yeah. Can we make sure to put a link for this book in Amazon? Again, guys, we don't get paid by Amazon or anything. We're just here sharing stuff that, I didn't even find this book. It was our CEO who came across this book and then shared it with a couple other people. And just from applying these tactics and tools, it's how we learn it, right? You have to, Jim Quick talks about, the best way to learn something is to coach it, and so when somebody's coaching or saying something that they learned from whatever personal development they're digesting, what is that, right? I want to know about that. And there's a lot of information out there. It can be difficult. Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying these episodes and you enjoyed this episode specifically, please leave a comment, leave a rating and review. If you do, we will send you a free shirt. That's right. Just hit us up, contact us, let us know your shirt and size, leave us a review, and we'll send it out. We appreciate you, and we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Hey, everybody. Quick disclaimer. The Know Your Dose podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Let's be real. None of us are doctors. Our content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical or public health advice. Please be smart and always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Seriously, never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. That would just be insane.